We all live under a glass dome, in the sense that we are locked in a confined space, with creatures we do not fully understand, but we literally depend on them, and on the byproducts they produce, just like tiny snails in a closed terrarium. And I am, of course, talking about plants. We humans are just pathetic little bugs, especially when compared to plants. If we imagine that a jar represents the mass of all living things on Earth, then 8 billion people would make up merely 1% of the total biomass, while plants would make up 80%. But what would happen if everything that produces oxygen suddenly died? Everything that photosynthesizes? How long would humanity last without a single plant on the planet? In normal air, there is approximately 21% oxygen. Its concentration would have to drop to at least 16% for people to start experiencing shortness of breath and confusion. Imagine that all the plants on the planet have died, including algae and plankton, and on top of that, their remains were completely decomposed by bacteria, which also spent precious oxygen on this decomposition process. In that case, the share of oxygen in the atmosphere would drop to 20.7%. Yes, the level would hardly change at all. And this level would remain the same in a year, in 100 years, and even in thousands of years. It turns out that the death of plants plays almost no role in our breathing, but we would still die right after them, just not from suffocation. We would face death by starvation, because almost all food chains originate from plants. Forage crops feed our future beef. And most importantly, wheat and rice are the absolute foundation of our diet. Up to 83% of all calories we consume come directly from plants. And if they disappear, the world's grain reserves in all warehouses will last for only 4 months. It turns into a paradox. Without plants, we will be able to breathe for hundreds of years, but without food, we will only last a few short years. The slogans saying forests are the lungs of the planet sound like mere noise. How is the world actually structured then? And who is really providing us with oxygen? From school, we remember that plants are green in summer and yellow in autumn, and that they feed from the ground, that they have no feelings, cannot communicate, and cannot move, and that they simply feed on sunlight. But here's a spoiler for you. Almost everything from that list is a lie or a severe oversimplification. Plants are actually quite cunning. They communicate with each other and can even feel pain. Every single plant is actually 3 organisms at once. They devour flesh, set forests on fire, and control the climate. Let's start with a simple question. Why does an avocado have such a massive pit? What kind of animal is capable of swallowing it and planting it elsewhere? The answer lies hidden in the distant past. It was meant for giant sloths. Such megafauna lived exactly 13,000 years ago. The avocado specifically adapted to these now extinct giant animals. Another interesting example is orchids. They helped Charles Darwin confirm his theory of evolution. He saw a huge nectar tube on a Madagascar orchid, a spur that was about 30 centimeters long. Darwin hypothesized that a specific butterfly must exist, incapable of reaching this deeply hidden nectar, and such a butterfly was indeed found. But only 40 years after Darwin's death, proof of the theory of evolution continued to emerge even after he was gone. But how did plants become so successful in the first place? How did they form the vast majority of our biomass? For this, we need to travel back to Earth 32 billion years ago. A day lasted only 13 hours back then. The sun bathed the planet in deadly ultraviolet radiation. There was almost no oxygen in the air at all, but the ocean was full of dissolved iron. During this period, the first oxygen-producing microorganisms colonized the ocean. They were called cyanobacteria. They produced so much oxygen that the oceans literally rusted because of the oxidized iron. We still find layers of red iron ore where those ancient oceans used to be. So much oxygen accumulated that some species simply died out, while others learned to survive in it. Ordinary bacteria produced a maximum of 2 energy molecules, ATP, from 1 glucose molecule, but the advanced cyanobacteria used oxygen to do much more. They made over 30 ATP molecules from that exact same molecule. Other organisms envied this incredible efficiency and decided to enslave the cyanobacteria. These were the ancestors of modern plants. Back then, they were just single-celled organisms. Plants did not invent photosynthesis, they stole it. They absorbed cyanobacteria inside themselves, which eventually turned into internal organs called chloroplasts. Even earlier, these protoplants swallowed another type of microbe, which eventually became the mitochondria. Now, inside the ancestor of the plant, there was a factory producing sugar during the day, and right next to it, another bacterium converting that sugar into energy around the clock. To this day, every plant is essentially 3 types of organisms, with 3 different sets of DNA in every single cell. It is a complete survival kit for autonomous existence. No need to hunt anyone, just breathe and grow. Photosynthesis is an overpowered biological ability. Generally speaking, it looks like this. A plant catches exhaled carbon dioxide, adds water and light, and gets sugar and oxygen. To make this work, millions of biological nanomachines labor inside a leaf. Inside the cells are chloroplasts that turn CO2 into sugar. Deeper inside the chloroplasts lie thylakoids, structures that look a lot like tiny pancakes. They act as miniature colliders. Using light, they separate oxygen from water and split hydrogen into protons and electrons. This process jumpstarts biological turbines that assemble ATP molecules, and the oxygen separated from the water is simply thrown away as a byproduct. If you conduct an experiment and put spinach leaf discs in water with baking soda in the light, they will start to float to the surface because oxygen bubbles from photosynthesis form inside them. But in the dark, this will not happen, and the spinach will stay on the bottom. Plants do not supply the planet with oxygen out of the goodness of their hearts. They are the biggest egoists on this planet. Do you think caffeine is produced to cheer humans up? No, caffeine is a chemical weapon against insects. It is meant to stop them from eating the leaves. Caffeine destroys the nervous system of insects. They stop moving and eventually die of starvation. But for a large human with a working liver, caffeine is perfectly safe. It simply blocks our fatigue receptors. Plants need oxygen for their own respiration in the mitochondria. They breathe oxygen exactly like we do, breaking down sugar to get energy. Forests are not the lungs of the planet. A huge portion of the oxygen is consumed by the plants themselves and local animals, and the rest is used for decomposition inside the soil by fungi and bacteria. The net oxygen balance of any large forest is roughly zero. So where did the world's oxygen supply come from? We inherited it from the distant past. Billions of years ago, ancient phytoplankton died and sank to the ocean floor. They sank so fast they did not have time to rot. They turned into rock, leaving a surplus of oxygen in the atmosphere. Later, ancient trees that appeared before the dinosaurs also contributed. Fungi at that time did not yet know how to decompose wood, so the trunks accumulated in swamps for millennia, turning into coal. This is how the oxygen level on Earth permanently rose. Why are plants green? If they wanted to absorb maximum light, they would be black. But elite's goal is not to gather all the light, but to avoid overheating. Chlorophyll absorbs the red and blue parts of the spectrum well, but it reflects the green part straight into our eyes. This protects the plant from severe solar burns. Nature is pragmatic. Green turned out to be the safest and most efficient compromise. And why do leaves change color in the fall? Actually, they just stop being green. Yellow and orange pigments, carotenoids, sit in the leaves starting from early spring. They act as a natural sunscreen. When there is less sunlight in autumn, the plant shuts down its sugar factories. The green chlorophyll is dismantled and hidden in the trunk for the winter. And then the yellow pigments become visible, giving us the golden autumn. In autumn, these pigments protect the dismantled chlorophyll from UV damage. If yellow is not enough, the plant produces red pigment. It is the most powerful natural sunscreen. How do plants know that autumn has arrived? They have analogs of our sensory organs. The sensitive plant, Mimosa pudica, is the introvert of the plant world. If you touch it, it will fold its leaves, and from a strong hit, it will drop the entire branch. If you let Mimosa breathe medical anesthesia, it will fall asleep, and it will completely stop reacting to touch. Plants do not have eyes or ears, cells, but their receptors are distributed throughout their entire body. Photoreceptors replace their vision. Certain proteins distinguish day from night, blue skies, and red sunsets. Mechanoreceptors are responsible for the sense of touch. Calcium runs through microtubules reacting to wind pressure or touch. This is how a tree knows which way the wind blows and strengthens its trunk, or how a creeping vine finds a support to climb. Plants do not hear speech, but they do feel sound vibrations. Catching the buzzing of bees, flowers make their nectar sweeter. Roots have an analog of smell and taste, finding nitrogen in the soil. And some seeds can detect the smell of smoke, waiting for a forest fire to end before sprouting. Plants also feel gravity. A seed in complete darkness knows where down is. Thanks to heavy starch bags inside their cells, they roll to the bottom, giving a hormonal signal to the shoot to grow in the opposite direction. But plants react slowly, except for carnivorous species. The Venus flytrap and other carnivores kill insects for nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, elements that are scarce in their native soil. They still get their energy from the sun. The bladderwort plant opens its trap and sucks in the victim in milliseconds. Carnivorous Nepenthes plants went even further. Their pitchers serve as toilets for bats and tree shrews. Animal feces become the perfect fertilizer for the flower. To prevent the flytrap from snapping shut from a random dust speck, it has a failsafe. It waits for at least 2 touches of the mechanoreceptors within a short time. Signals inside plants are transmitted by electrical impulses, extremely similar to our own nervous system. If a caterpillar eats a leaf, powerful waves of calcium carry an alarm signal throughout the plant. Plants communicate effectively with each other and with animals. A flower has a negative electrical charge, while a flying bee has a positive one. The bee attracts the pollen, and the flower's charge changes, giving a signal to other bees that there is less nectar here now. Communication also happens through the air using chemicals. When a giraffe eats an acacia, the tree releases ethylene gas, a stress hormone. Neighboring trees smell it and pump their leaves full of bitter tannin, which is highly toxic to herbivores. The smell of freshly cut grass is actually the scream of a dying plant, warning its neighbors about the danger. Corn eaten by caterpillars releases chemicals calling for parasitic wasps. The wasps fly in and lay their eggs directly inside the caterpillars. Beans under attack by one type of mite call for help from another, predatory mite. Plants have a powerful immune system at the level of every single cell. They can trigger a quarantine, blocking off infected areas, or order infected cells to self-destruct. Plants can even suffer from a bacterial equivalent of cancer and treat themselves with a form of chemotherapy. If a tree is irreversibly affected by rot, it isolates that part from its communications, like sealing off a flooded compartment in a submarine. Unlike animals, plants do not have a Hayflick limit on cell division. This makes them potentially immortal, allowing them to live for millennia. Plants have aggressive strategies for seizing territories. In the Amazon, there are gardens where only one species of tree grows, because they shelter ants that destroy all competitors. The strangler fig wraps its roots around another tree and kills it, taking its place under the sun. And some grasses and bushes literally provoke forest fires. They grow quickly, leave seeds deep in the soil, and dry out, becoming the perfect fuel for a blaze. The fire destroys competitors, while their seeds calmly sprout in the ashes. Where does a huge tree get a mass of several tons? Scientist Jan van Helmont grew a willow in a pot for 5 years, watering it only with water. The tree gained 75 kilograms, while the soil in the pot decreased by only 60 grams. Helmont decided that the mass came from the water, but he was wrong. Plants pump water not with a physical pump, but through evaporation in the leaves, which creates a constant negative pressure. Only about 2% of the drawn water remains in the plant. The other 98% evaporates. The real building material of a tree is carbon dioxide from the air. The tree binds CO2, turns it into sugar, and then into cellulose. The exhale gas, the tree turns it into wood, and humans later make paper out of it. Thanks to the mechanism of water evaporation, plants control the climate. They account for up to 77% of all water evaporation on land. The moisture from forests forms clouds and triggers rainy seasons over continents. Forests work as a giant humidifier and air conditioner for the earth. To grow huge, trees use a framework of dead tissue. Up to 95% of the trunk of a regular tree consists of dead cells forming annual rings. Only a thin layer just under the bark is actually alive. Trees strive to grow taller than their competitors to get more light. The tallest tree right now is the Hyperion sequoia, standing over 106 meters tall. The physical growth limit for trees is about 130 meters, because water simply will not rise any higher than that. But to become the largest, it is not necessary to grow upwards. In Utah, there is the Pando forest, which is a single genetic organism. One aspen tree cloned itself, growing 47,000 trunks from a shared root system. Pando weighs 6,000 tons and has been living for 12,000 years. On the island of Tasmania, the Lamacha plant is strictly hidden. It has been cloning itself for over 40,000 years. And at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea grows Posidonia grass. Its root network has been spreading across the seafloor for about 200,000 years. Plants can survive any apocalypse on the planet. 252 million years ago, due to volcanic eruptions and the greenhouse effect, trees died out. But hardy grass multiplied, which later evolved back into forests. 66 million years ago, an asteroid fell and forests burned down, but spores and seeds survived in the ash, waiting for the sun to return. During the Ice Age, plants survived in climate refuges, only to conquer the world again later. Even a nuclear winter will not destroy them as a kingdom. Humans will never be able to kill all the plants on the planet. They are the oldest, largest, and most influential creatures on Earth. They are the true masters of this planet, and someday they will sprout on our graves, continuing their endless cycle of life. But until that happens, keep wondering at how our world works.